there are pieces of evidence that is left at every single crime scene. This is me teaching, going back to my classroom. There's evidence there. You just have to find it. That's the only thing that happens. We don't find that evidence, but in every single crime scene, especially now where
this is gonna hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast.
We find our place in this world that gives us purpose, engrossing ourselves, making a difference, and impacting those around us. To those around us, becoming something of a superhero, showing up to save the day. Day after day, seeing the worst in humanity can eat away at your soul. Little by little, and with each new incident, a piece of your compassion disappears, until one day, your exterior appears as hard as stone, but your insides are jelly. Who is there to help those called upon to help us? The heroes must appear invincible, but invincibility will void any humanity inside your soul. This is the reality of police work and the price of heroism. I'm Kevin Donaldson here with Mike Failace, and on this episode of the Suffering Podcast, we welcome a very special guest from a very long way, and that's Detective Chris Anderson, who should change his name to Chief Chris Anderson, but he refuses to because that's the way he's branded. And on this episode of the Suffering Podcast, we talk about the suffering of being a detective. Now, Chris has spent his entire career trying to give those small answers to people just looking for justice. Mm-hmm. Chris, thank you so much for flying all this way. Your arms must be tired. Look at that.
And he came up just to see us.
Of course.
That's the only reason I'm here, guys.
He's flying back out tonight.
That's right.
No other business in New Jersey. He's just coming up to see us and then to get it. That's how big the Suffering Podcast has got.
Why not? Why not?
Why not?
But, Kevin, again, and we talked about it before, thank you for bringing another guy in here that's a lot bigger than me. We got to get Scott Stevens back in here, or EMS Eric, someone that's shorter than me.
In all fairness, Chris is like 4 or 5 inches taller than me.
I walked in here, I thought he was part of the curtain. You got the dark shirt on him. The guy's huge.
That's how we grow them in Alabama, man. That's what we do.
That's what Southern cooking does.
That's it, man. It's the collard greens.
They don't have Taylor ham or pork roll down there. I think that stunts our growth down.
It's like the Fred Flintstone where you put the brontosaurus ribs on the cart and just tip it over.
You just eat it. That's right. That's what we do.
Did you ever have Taylor ham or pork roll?
I don't even know what those are.
Wow.
Taylor ham.
Holy shit.
You got to take them out after this.
I've had ham.
No.
We usually take it in the backyard and kill it ourselves.
No, you take a bunch of ham, throw a ton of salt on it, and it's so good.
Really?
Oh, it's so good.
That sounds...
How long are you up here for?
So I'm only here for a couple of days. I think I fly out Saturday. So today is Thursday, 2 days.
We got to get them.
We got to get Taylor ham.
Yeah, Taylor ham, egg, and cheese.
Yeah. So just to give you give the Southern boy a little education.
Okay.
If you go south of the Raritan Bridge in New Jersey, it's pork roll. And this is an argument that's been seriously. This is an argument that's been going on since the beginning of time.
Okay.
In North Jersey, it's Taylor ham. The truth of the matter is Taylor ham is the brand. It's like calling a tissue a Kleenex.
Uh-huh.
People in North Jersey don't understand that. I, as a South Jersey educated man, do.
We're smart in North Jersey. South Jersey, I mean.
Before we get into anything, let's throw a big shout out to our marquee sponsor. That's Toyota of Hackensack. We don't trust anybody as police, but we do trust Toyota of Hackensack. So go to toyotahackensack.com. Let them find you a car. Chris, we've talked a lot, and I'm so excited to have you in here today. There's a lot of stuff that I'd like to pick your brain about. Of course, your time on First 48, your time on Reasonable Doubt, and your new projects going on with Crime and Cookie Juice and your new books coming out. But before we do, one of our things that we always do every single episode is we take a question from our audience and we ask our guests. So you're our guest today. You get the first crack at this, and it comes from Sal Parisi. Somebody actually used their real name. What's the toughest case you ever investigated?
Wow. That's it's kind of hard to say. Because look, in Birmingham, man, we had a lot of homicides. I worked a lot of homicides in Birmingham.
What was your yearly average there?
Yearly average, it was over 100. So that may not sound like a lot to a lot of people, but you have to understand what's our population. So our population in the city of Birmingham is under 200,000. So that's the reason why when you put it per capita, Birmingham is one of the most dangerous cities in the country.
Not to mention, that's not how many people were shot. That's what people don't. That your shootings probably were up in the thousands.
And we got one of the best hospitals there is in the country, and they have saved a lot of people. But those 100 per
the
year,
old trauma center.
right? Exactly, man. UAB is an excellent hospital. They have saved a lot of people. When I walked into an emergency room to see my victims, I've looked at them and said, "Oh, they're not gonna make it," and some of them did.
So UAB, if you want to sponsor the Crime and Cookie Juice, reach out to Detective Chris Anderson on
There
Instagram.
you go. That's right.
That's University of Alabama, Birmingham.
Birmingham. That's correct. That's right.
So out of those 100 average per year, or any case, it doesn't have to be a homicide, what do you think the toughest case you ever investigated was?
So the toughest one that I investigated was, I wrote about it in my book that'll be coming out pretty soon, called The Case. It was the murder of a young woman by the name of Kayla. And that case touched me personally because we talk about this. I think Kev and I think we've talked about this a little bit as I was investigating that case. Now, my daughter's name is Kayla. As I was investigating
that puts a personal touch on
that
it right
adds
away.
the personal touch. They
Absolutely.
were not too far a difference in age, and she was an innocent victim that was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Now, that's us as cops. We understand that we don't have a lot of victims that are innocent victims, but this young lady was an innocent victim, and it got to the point I was going through so much as a new investigator when I got that case that every time I saw this young lady or every time I thought about her, it wasn't her. It was my daughter. I was investigating my own child's murder, and my child was right there with me every night that I came home. And, it just took a toll on me. And I got really close and personal with the family. And for 3 months, I want to say it was all I could do was to work this case.
Did you ever solve it?
Solved it, yeah.
Because if you didn't, imagine how that would weigh on you.
Man, dude, I probably wouldn't have taken the sergeant's exam. I probably would have stayed in homicide until I got that case solved, because it was one of those cases that didn't match the first 48 rule where you need a lead within the first 4. I didn't have a single lead for this case at all for 3 months. And I'm talking about, I did everything. I mean, I went back to the crime scene. I knocked on doors. I put out flyers, went on the news, everything that you could do imaginable to get a lead on a case. I didn't get it. But when it happened, oh my gosh, when I got that lead.
When you get that one lead, it's like
the floodgates open, and we got the guys in custody, and they all confessed to their portion of the case. And it was like I had been carrying a 2-ton sack of bricks on my back the entire time.
It was one of those cases, because I think we all can relate to this, where you go home at night and your jaw hurts from the stress.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Mike, what do you think? I know you worked at DB for quite a while.
I was in the bureau for about 10 years, and one case that still sticks with me, and it was never solved. We had, I wasn't even working that night, but we had a car go down the street, 2 people crossing the street, flipped the people in the air, and the car took off. They left a little piece of the grill at the scene, and we figured that, I'll never forget, it came back to a GMC Envoy.
Yeah.
So we had a GMC dealer in town. And we took I caught the case the next day. So they didn't even call me in that night. I caught it the next day. So I was behind the 8 ball to begin with. We had the little piece, had to be about a 5-inch piece of the grill. We wound up figuring out it came from a GMC Envoy. We went down. We worked our asses off between us and the local, the county prosecutor's office, fatal accident squad, and all that. For months, I knew the part number of that piece. The color of the car, it was red. I'll never forget it. The color of the car, it was a red car. The color number was U86. I remember everything about it.
I think
never solved that crime. It still eats me today.
I think those
the people weren't killed. They were hurt, but it was a hit and run accident with two pedestrians struck. And I never saw that.
I think those cases you become personally invested in, like Chris with his daughter and you with this here. I think you remember all those little details because I actually had a different answer to this question. And, my answer was a little bit more mundane because it's more about the psychological effects of certain crimes. Mm-hmm. You go into a residential burglary, which has a very slim chance of being caught, and you see the psychological effects it does. I remember a young lady. She didn't want to sleep in her bed. Somebody had broken into their house. They came home, obviously, discovered everything, and she didn't want to sleep in her bed, and that just affected me. But that's not the toughest one I ever investigated. Unlike you guys, I never got a chance to be in the bureau. I wasn't. I just.
Well, you had the tougher one. You were an accident investigator, so that was.
But it's different, and I'm going to tell you why being in the DB is different than doing accident investigations. I investigate a lot of motor vehicle crashes, a lot of fatals, and that was my thing. But all the evidence for a motor vehicle crash is there, or 90% of it is there. You have to uncover it. Where you guys are working cases where there's no evidence, there's not evidence present because whatever actor committed the crime is gone. So, you take the skid marks off the road, and the one that sticks in my head, it was a stolen car out of Livingston. Kid came down the street. One of the officers was in pursuit. He launches up a tree, and the car. It was a white Lexus LX3. No, what was this sedan? It was a 350 or 300 or something. Split the car in two on a tree that was 4 inches in diameter. It was most amazing, and hung up in the tree. I can tell you, he hit a fire hydrant going up the berm. He was doing 77 miles an hour when he launched. The fire hydrant went 311 feet. The engine went 110 feet and went into the back of a car, and he just died of an aortic tear. Mm-hmm. Those are those details. And that's what I'm talking about, where it totally resonates with me when you say you remember the serial number, because I can remember those numbers. And I'll bet you this accident's 23 years old, mm-hmm. and you never forget them.
Yeah, man.
But that's the one that sticks out in my mind.
Well, yeah, that shows the love for the job.
Yeah.
Obviously, the three of us have the love that we needed for the job because we remember those things. Mm-hmm. You talk to one of these cops that just takes a job for the paycheck. They don't remember any of that stuff.
Well, it's a puzzle. It's a puzzle that you're trying to put together with missing pieces.
Yeah.
Where you guys, and again, I have to give it to the people in the DB on this one because you're trying to put a puzzle together where you have no idea where the pieces. At least I know where the pieces are.
Right.
Yeah.
So there are pieces of evidence that is left at every single crime scene. This is me teaching, going back to my classroom. There's evidence there. You just have to find it. That's the only thing that happens. We don't find that evidence, but in every single crime scene, especially now where science is really taking over the investigative process, if we had half of the scientific evidence or the scientific capabilities that we would have had, I would have loved to stay in the detective bureau. Would have loved it because they got so much.
It was so interesting.
Yeah.
Like Kevin said, putting together a puzzle.
Yeah.
You get this piece of information, you take this information, you put it together, and I get a bigger picture.
But you got to turn it a couple times before it fits.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Then you get that piece, and you put it together, and you get the bigger piece.
And that's the love of it. And you know what? That was. I pulled that question because Chris was coming in there, and I was like, I don't know how I'm going to answer this one. It might not be that good of a question, but it turned out to be something that.
Yeah, man.
I want to go out and do an accident now.
No, right.
But you got to understand something. I was one of those weird people that actually liked doing motor vehicle crashes.
Really? Mm-hmm.
Nobody likes doing motor vehicle crashes.
I hated them.
Of course.
I hated them.
What do you mean you were weird? You're still one of those weird people.
As a matter of fact, I worked with a guy on the squad, recently came out of the DB, mm-hmm. and they did a lot of our domestics.
Right.
So the DV paperwork in New Jersey changes every single day. And I hated domestics. I couldn't stand domestics. I made a deal with him. Now, in the department I worked in, maybe we got 1 or 2 domestics a week, mm-hmm. maybe.
Okay.
I said, look, I'll make you a deal. I'll do every motor vehicle crash while we're working together, but you take every DV. He goes, absolutely a deal. Now, it seemed like I was getting the short end of the stick, right? I could do what they called an NJTR1. I could do it in, 10 minutes. I would do it before the accident was cleared. Everything, soup to nuts. Because I knew... There's numbers going down the side. I knew what had to go in those numbers off the top of my head.
You had to take the template, put it over it, each side, and put these numbers in
that
that
was
correlate to the accident.
That was the old days of the paper.
I can guarantee you that I'll steal some reports, some accident reports that I got back from the state with my name on them that I messed up something on. I can guarantee you they're still around there.
Back in the day, like Kevin said, when we used to have to write the reports,
we had to write it, right?
We had to draw pictures of the accident.
Yeah. Remember it well.
I'm not an artist.
Exactly.
So they'd come back to me and say, "What the hell is this?" I don't know. I put arrows where the car was going.
So if you're looking for dirt on Detective Chris Anderson, just go back to
open some of those old those accident case files, so you can open them up, and there it is.
Car A hit car B. Done.
Right. Stick figures for the victims laying out in the road. Hey,
I always used to say driver A stated blank, driver B stated blank, right. Collision occurred. Done. Let the insurance company figure it out.
I know. Yeah, man.
Sal, thank you so much for sending that one in. Keep sending in your questions. Trust me, we want to get them on the air. Mm-hmm. Now, Chris Anderson, the big man on campus
from Alabama.
Do they actually refer to you in your new position as chief as the big man on campus?
Everybody calls me chief, and I love it. I love going around because look, man, policing at a school, at an institution for higher education is much different than it was when we worked the streets.
And being a road cop.
Yeah. Man, y'all know that's right. It is way different, and I love it.
Yeah. So why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Okay. So my name is Detective Chris Anderson.
You weren't born this tall, were you?
I was born 6'5", 300 pounds.
Your poor mother.
Right. No. So yeah, I started off in police work back in 1995. I want to say it was 94, 95. And the real reason that I went into law enforcement was because of my mother. I'm a second-gen law enforcement officer. My mom was one of only a few Black female police officers in the city of Birmingham. She went in the mid to late 70s. And
before you go any further on that one, the majority of our audience is New York, New Jersey, maybe some California. I don't think our audience is going to grasp what you just said right there. Really? Being the first female Black officer in Birmingham, Alabama.
Right.
Okay, the heart of the civil rights movement. Right. In the 70s.
Right. So, and I want to make sure that we are clear on this. She wasn't the first, but there were not a lot of Black females, and there wasn't a lot of Black people of color, but there were not a lot of Black females that came into police work. And, they had an extremely hard time, breaking those barriers. There were several times where she took the supervisory test, and, they would hire way less qualified people over her because of skin color. It was a good old boy system, and that lasted almost until I got there.
But I mean, we had this conversation before, though. Women in the 70s really weren't accepted in law enforcement at all.
At all.
Never mind being a woman of color. Right. That's groundbreaking.
Yeah. This sounds like a new suffering podcast story. I see what I did. You see what I did?
He just did that. I can't believe you did it, but that's all right.
Trademark. We got it.
So let me give you some backstory. Let me give you some. Chris and I.
Hey, Drew, get her on the phone now. Tell her we want her first.
Chris and I were talking, and I said, "Wow, that would be a great story to feel what that was like to go through that type of prejudice in a society where you're the only." Mm-hmm. And Chris is like, well, I want to do it on my show. No, you can't do it on your show. No, there's enough space in the ether for all of us.
It really is. We could do that show 2 or 3 times. And,
we don't compete against each other.
Exactly. That's why I'm here.
We can all
I flew this whole way here just to.
I thought you swam up the coast. But
No, right.
So how long were you on the street?
So I had 2 stints on the streets. I didn't spend a lot of time there. From 94 up until 1999, I worked as a street cop. Well, and part of that I spent in narcotics, but I only spent like 12 months in narcotics. So went to the detective bureau, fell in love with it. I worked in the detective bureau from 1999 all the way up to 2012 when I was promoted. And I circulated all the way through. I went through burglary, auto theft, robbery, because we didn't work like most departments. They don't separate their different crimes. Everybody works everything. No, we separated ours. So I worked in. We had a burglary unit, the group that specialized in burglaries. We had a group that specialized in robberies, and then I went to homicide, and I spent the most of my investigative years in homicide, which, by the way, is not a good idea. So, and I'm sure we'll get into that. Sure. I'll tell you why I don't think it's a good idea. But yeah, I spent most of my investigative work in homicide, and then I got promoted, went back to the streets, spent about 3 years on the streets then, and then they moved me back. They brought me back to homicide as a supervisor.
Well, how often in the homicide world did you come across a scene where the person was just clinging to life? Were you there when they afterwards anticipating the homicide?
Yeah, so there were a couple cases. Usually those cases came about when I was working with Birmingham. If it had been a long night and we had been just rolling on every single thing. So we've had a couple times where, either the victim is still out on the scene or they have just transported them to the emergency room. And one thing that the doctors would always do, they would allow us to come into the emergency room and ask them, if we could get some questions out of them, they would allow us to do that. But if they were really, really working on this person, trying to really, really save their life, you couldn't do it. So
you're just looking for anything at that point.
Looking for anything, hoping you can get in that mission before.
Grasping for straws.
Yeah, exactly. You got to get it. You got to do it. So yeah, that's happened a couple of times during my career.
So and that's so tough to see someone laying there, grasping for their life, and you have to get information out of them.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a tough situation.
So I'm one of those types of people that I hate to see people suffer. I hate it.
You're on the wrong show, brother.
I know, right? I mean, it's
a suffering podcast.
Right? But I hate to see. I guess I should have. I hate to see people in pain, because look, I'm one of those dudes that I care about people. So it was much harder for me to see cases like that than it was to go onto a crime scene where the person is already deceased. But it took me a long while to get over that, which is a portion of our book that we're writing. That'll be a portion of my story, because there were plenty of nights where I went into homicide and I would wake up in the middle of the night and my victims would be laying next to me, or they're sitting in a chair. I had one that slept on my stomach for a while.
Really?
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
You might have sought some help for that one.
I know, right? But, look, I did. It was through the bottle of liquor that I was drinking,
The Angel Eyes bourbon?
Yeah, right, that's right. That's right. That was the introduction.
And that's the thing, too, in law enforcement, we all see, dead bodies. Mm-hmm. And you always look at the face.
Right.
That face is, like, ingrained in your memory. Mm-hmm. I mean, like you said, I'd go to bed sometimes and it was a picture frame in my bedroom, and I'd look up the picture frame and see that person's face.
Yeah, man.
I mean,
well, did you
carry it home with you? I mean, it's terrible.
Both of you gentlemen had to go to several autopsies, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So, what did you think about autopsies? What's your take on those?
They smell.
Yeah, they stink. They do stink. So, I tried to go to the majority of all of my autopsies because I needed that information. When I first started in homicide, it was hard because I was still seeing the victim, little Bobby, or my victim James, instead of looking at that victim as evidence. And so here's another little nugget that I'm gonna give your listeners that I've said this several times. There are a lot of times where you see law enforcement officers come into a crime scene or come to a house and they seem so detached, like they don't care. 90% of the time when that happens, it's not that they don't care. They have to detach themselves from what's actually happening, from the human emotion side of it.
Putting up the front.
You put the barrier up in front of you just so you can move along and find some justice for those victims. That happened to me. And that was part of the reason why I went into homicide. If we got time, let me give you a story.